In the quiet town of Ashbourne, where traditions ruled over every aspect of life, Miss Eleanor Whitmore lived under the watchful eye of her Aunt Margaret. Eleanor was a young lady of 19, full of curiosity and dreams of romance, yet her life was dictated by strict rules. In Ashbourne, a lady of good standing was never to be alone with a gentleman, and every meeting, every conversation, had to be observed by a chaperone. For Eleanor, this rule was the greatest burden, especially now that she had met Mr. Henry Lockwood. Henry was a charming young man with a kind smile and intelligent eyes. He had recently arrived in Ashbourne to visit his uncle, and from the moment he was introduced to Eleanor at a garden party, there was a spark between them. Over the next few weeks, Henry called upon the Whitmore residence several times, always under the strict supervision of Aunt Margaret. Eleanor longed for a moment alone with him, a chance to speak freely without the ever-present eyes of her chaperone. One afternoon, Henry invited Eleanor and her aunt to join him and his uncle for a carriage ride through the countryside. It was a pleasant outing, filled with polite conversation and stolen glances. As the carriage rolled along a quiet country lane, Henry leaned slightly towards Eleanor and spoke just above a whisper. "Miss Whitmore, do you not find these rules exhausting?" Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. He had dared to say aloud what she had been thinking for so long. She glanced at her aunt, who was engaged in a conversation with Henry's uncle, before replying softly, "More than I can say." Henry smiled, understanding her unspoken frustration. "If only we could speak without interruption." "If only," Eleanor agreed. How was one meant to truly know another when every meeting was supervised? Days passed, and Henry continued to visit, always the perfect gentleman, always careful not to break the rules of courtship. He wrote letters, but these too were read by Aunt Margaret before they reached Eleanor's hands. His words were kind, respectful, but lacked the honesty Eleanor longed for. Then, one evening at a grand ball hosted by the town's mayor, Eleanor and Henry found themselves in a rare moment of near privacy. "Eleanor, I must ask, if we were free to speak, to meet as we wished, would you still look at me the way you do now?" It was the first time he had ever said her name without the formal Miss Whitmore. She hesitated, but only for a second. "Yes, Henry, I would." His smile was warm, relieved. "Then that is enough for me." She led Eleanor away, and the rest of the evening passed with the same careful politeness that defined their courtship. Eleanor wanted more than stolen glances and polite letters. She wanted a real conversation, a chance to know Henry beyond the limits of society's expectations. But she knew there was no way around it. If she wished to maintain her honor, she had to follow the rules. One afternoon, Henry arrived with his uncle to formally ask for permission to court Eleanor. Aunt Margaret was delighted. Henry was a respectable young man from a good family, but she made it clear that the courtship must proceed properly. No meetings without supervision, no letters without approval. Eleanor knew this was the only way, yet a part of her still wished for more freedom. Over the following months, their courtship continued under the ever-watchful eye of society. They grew closer, despite the barriers placed between them. They found small ways to express their feelings, a pressed flower hidden in a book, a brief touch of hands when no one was looking, a whispered word that held more meaning than it seemed. And perhaps, in time, it would be enough. One evening, as Henry prepared to leave after a chaperoned visit, he turned to Eleanor and said softly, "We may not have the freedom we desire, but if you will have me, I promise to always find a way to show you how I feel."